The air in my living room hung heavy that night, thick with the sticky warmth of late summer. A faint hum of cicadas drifted through the open window, blending with the soft creak of the floorboards under my bare feet. I stood there, the thin cotton of my sundress brushing against my thighs, its pale yellow faded from too many washes. Lucas sat on the couch, his broad shoulders slouched forward, fingers tapping restlessly against his knee. Henry leaned against the armrest, his silver-streaked hair catching the dim glow of the lamp, his eyes steady and unreadable. Mason lingered near the doorway, arms crossed, his quiet presence almost lost in the shadows. They'd come over for drinks, or that's what I'd told them. A bottle of bourbon sat unopened on the coffee table, glasses lined up like soldiers waiting for a command. But I had other plans. I reached for the hem of my dress, fingers curling into the fabric. In one smooth motion, I pulled it up and over my head, letting it drop to the floor with a whisper of sound. The silence that followed was sharp, broken only by the uneven rhythm of their breathing. 3 pairs of eyes locked onto me, Lucas's widening with a flicker of heat, Henry's narrowing like he was piecing together a puzzle, Mason's darting away before snapping back, caught. I didn't rush, I didn't smile. I let the stillness stretch, the weight of their gazes sinking into my skin like the August heat. My hair fell loose across my shoulders, brushing the tops of my arms, and I took a step forward, slow and steady, toward Lucas. The floor creaked again as I closed the distance. He shifted slightly, his hands flexing against his thighs, but he didn't move away. I stopped just in front of him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off him, close enough to see the pulse jump in his neck. Then I leaned in, my lips brushing his, slow, certain, like I'd already mapped out every second of this moment. His breath caught, a rough sound that vibrated against my mouth, and I pressed closer, tasting the faint salt of his skin. He didn't pull back. None of them did. I knew they wouldn't. When I finally eased away, his hands were still hovering near my hips, like he wasn't sure where to put them. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker, charged with something unspoken. I straightened up, letting my eyes drift across the 3 of them. Lucas still staring, Henry's jaw tightening just a fraction, Mason shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Grace," Lucas said, his voice low, rough around the edges. "You sure about this?" I didn't answer. Words would have broken the spell. Instead, I stepped back, letting the moment settle, letting them feel the shift. They'd been circling me for weeks, whether they knew it or not. Lucas and I had been friends for years. Too long, maybe. Late nights talking over cheap beer had turned into something else lately. His glances lingering, his laugh catching when I brushed past him. Henry, his uncle, started showing up more often after his wife left last spring. He'd sit in my kitchen with a mug of coffee, asking about my day, his voice steady, but his eyes tracing the lines of my shoulders when he thought I didn't notice. And Mason, Henry's old army buddy, he'd tagged along tonight for the first time, quiet as always, watching from the sidelines with that careful, curious look he probably didn't even realize he had. They were here now, all 3 of them, and I wasn't about to let the night slip by. I turned slightly, the soft light from the lamp spilling across my bare skin, casting shadows that danced along the walls. "You didn't come just for the bourbon, did you?" I said, my voice soft but deliberate, cutting through the quiet. Lucas let out a short, uneven laugh, rubbing a hand across his jaw. "Didn't know this was on the table." Henry didn't move, but his eyes flicked to Lucas, then back to me, sharp and assessing. "You've got a way of surprising people, Grace," he said, his tone calm, like he was stating a fact. Mason stayed silent, but his arms dropped to his sides, his fingers flexing once, then stilling. I stepped closer to the coffee table, the cool wood brushing against my calf as I reached for the bottle. The cap twisted off with a faint pop, and I poured a splash into each glass, the amber liquid catching the light. "Well," I said, glancing over my shoulder at them. "Night's still young." I handed Lucas a glass, my fingers grazing his as he took it. Henry reached for his without a word, his knuckles brushing mine just long enough to send a spark up my arm. Mason hesitated, then stepped forward, taking the last one with a muttered, "Thanks," that barely broke the surface of the tension. They didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The couch creaked under us as Lucas's hands finally settled on my hips, his fingers digging in just enough to anchor me. I'd pulled him closer after that first kiss, guiding him down onto the cushions with a nudge of my knee. Now I was straddling him, the worn fabric rough against my thighs, my breath hitching as I found a rhythm. Steady, urgent, like a pulse I couldn't ignore. The room blurred at the edges, the faint glow of the lamp fading until it was just us, heat climbing fast between our bodies. His grip tightened, sliding me forward, and I braced my hands against the cushions, nails curling into the threadbare weave. A sound slipped out of me, sharp, involuntary. And he didn't flinch, just kept moving, his pace hard and focused, like he'd been waiting for this as long as I had. I matched him, instinct taking over, my hips rolling in time with his. Sweat beaded along my neck, trickling down as the air thickened, heavy with the scent of bourbon and summer dust. His breath came faster, warm against my collarbone, and I tilted my head back, letting the sensation build, each shift pushing me higher. "Grace," he muttered, voice rough, almost lost in the sound of our bodies moving together. I didn't answer, just pressed closer, my cheek brushing his jaw, feeling the stubble scrape my skin. His hands shifted, one sliding up my side, the other pulling me tighter against him, and I gasped, the edge creeping closer. Then it hit, sharp and fast, a wave that left me trembling, my fingers clenching the couch as I sank against him. He followed a heartbeat later, his grip faltering, a low groan rumbling through his chest as he tensed beneath me. We stayed like that for a moment, tangled and still, my forehead resting against his shoulder, his breath ragged in my ear. The room came back into focus slowly, the hum of cicadas outside, the faint clink of a glass on the table where Henry or Mason must have set it down. I didn't look at them yet. I didn't need to. I could feel their eyes, the weight of their silence pressing in from across the room. Lucas's hands slid off me, dropping to his sides as he leaned back, chest still heaving. I shifted, easing off him, the couch groaning again as I settled beside him. My skin was flushed, nerves still sparking, but I kept my movements slow, deliberate, letting the quiet stretch. He ran a hand through his hair, damp with sweat, and glanced at me sideways. "This might have been a bad idea," he said, his voice low, like he wasn't sure he meant it. I turned my head, lips brushing the edge of his jaw, tasting the salt there. "You think Henry or Mason suspect something?" He hesitated, his fingers flexing against the cushion. "They've been off lately. Henry keeps staring like he's trying to figure me out. Mason asked yesterday if I've been distracted, if I've been sneaking off somewhere." His eyes flicked toward the doorway, then back to me. "They're not stupid, Grace." I stretched out beside him, letting the blanket I'd grabbed from the armrest slip down to my waist, the cool air hitting my skin. "So they're curious," I said, my voice soft, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Isn't that half the fun?" He let out a quiet laugh, short and uneven, shaking his head like he couldn't argue. "You're something else." I didn't respond, just leaned back, letting my arm rest along the back of the couch, my fingers brushing his shoulder. The bourbon glasses sat untouched on the table, the bottle still open, its sharp scent cutting through the haze. I could hear Henry shift somewhere behind us, the faint creak of the floor as he moved, but I didn't turn. Not yet. Mason was still by the door. I'd caught the outline of him earlier, arms crossed, watching like he wasn't sure whether to stay or bolt. They hadn't left. That was enough for now. I tilted my head, letting my hair fall across my cheek, and glanced at Lucas again. "You're not worried, are you?" He met my eyes, his own dark and searching, then shook his head. "Not about them, not yet." His hand brushed my knee, a quick, almost unconscious touch, before he pulled it back. I smiled, stretching again, feeling the hum still lingering in my body. "Good," I said, letting my voice drop low. Because I'm not done surprising you." The words hung there, light but loaded, and I saw the flicker in his expression, half warning, half hunger. He didn't say anything else, just watched me, and I knew the night was far from over. The next morning came too soon, the sun barely creeping through the blinds when I shuffled into the kitchen. My hair was a mess, tangled from sleep, and I'd thrown on a loose t-shirt, soft, faded, barely skimming my thighs. The coffee maker gurgled on the counter, filling the air with a bitter, warm scent as I rubbed the last of the night from my eyes. I hadn't even poured a cup when the knock came, 3 sharp raps, loud enough to jolt me upright. My pulse kicked up, but I smoothed my expression, padding barefoot to the door. I cracked it open halfway, leaning against the frame, and there was Henry, standing tall and calm, his gray eyes steady, like he'd already worked out what he wanted to say. "Morning," he said, his voice low, even, like he was just dropping by for small talk. I tilted my head, pushing the door wider, keeping my face neutral. "Didn't expect you this early." He didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped inside, his boots scuffing the hardwood as his gaze swept the room. The couch still sat crooked from last night, the blanket draped haphazardly over the arm. He didn't sit, just turned to face me, hands loose at his sides. "Thought it was time we talked," he said, folding his arms. "About you and Lucas." I didn't answer right away. The coffee maker beeped behind me, a small, insistent sound, but I ignored it, crossing my arms to mirror him. "You've noticed then?" I said, keeping my tone light, testing the water. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint leather of his jacket, the outdoors still clinging to him. "I'm not blind, Grace. The way he stumbles out of here, half-dazed, grinning like a damn fool, it's obvious. Been obvious for a while." His eyes held mine, sharp and unflinching, but there was no anger there, just certainty. I didn't flinch either. "And you've been watching too, haven't you?" I said, letting my voice drop, soft but pointed. I shifted my weight, the hem of my shirt riding up just a fraction, and his gaze flickered, down, then back up, quick but deliberate. I stepped in closer, close enough for him to feel the warmth of me, and let my hand hover near his, fingers brushing the air above his knuckles. "Why wait so long to say something?" He didn't answer, just stood there, his breath steady but his fingers twitching once, like he was holding something back. "I know you've been watching," I said, quieter now, almost a whisper. "No need to pretend." His jaw tightened, just a flicker of movement, and I leaned in, my lips brushing his. Slow, firm, a kiss that left no room for doubt. He didn't pull away. For a beat, he was still, like he was deciding. Then his hand lifted, resting lightly at my waist, the weight of it warm through the thin fabric. I pressed closer, deepening the kiss, tasting the faint bitterness of coffee he must have had earlier. His grip tightened, just enough to pull me in, and I smiled against his mouth. When I eased back, his eyes flicked down again, tracing the outline of my shirt. Too short, too sheer to hide much. I didn't adjust it. I let the silence hang. Let him look. "You really don't care how this looks, do you?" he said, his voice rougher now, like he'd just found the edge of something he hadn't expected. I tilted my head, stepping in again, close enough that my breath brushed his cheek. "I care," I said, my fingers grazing his wrist, light but deliberate. "Just not in the way you expect." He stared at me, a long, slow beat, his hand still at my waist like he wasn't ready to let go. "You're playing with fire, Grace," he said. But there was no warning in it, just a fact, heavy and real. I smiled, small and sharp, and stepped back, turning toward the counter. "Maybe," I said over my shoulder, reaching for the coffee pot. "But it's a hell of a way to keep warm." I poured a cup, the steam curling up between us, and took a sip, feeling his eyes on me the whole time. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. And I knew I'd lit something in him that wasn't going out anytime soon. The morning wasn't over yet, and neither was this. Henry's eyes stayed on me as I set the coffee cup down, the steam still curling in the air between us. That kiss had shifted something. His calm cracked just enough for me to see the heat underneath. His hand lingered at my waist, fingers pressing through the thin fabric of my t-shirt, and I turned to face him fully, letting the silence stretch. Then he moved. One hand sliding to my neck, the other pulling me in, his lips finding mine again. This time it wasn't slow or testing. It was firm, certain, a kiss that carried weight. I leaned into it, my hands resting lightly on his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heartbeat under my palms. He backed me toward the armchair in the corner, the one with the frayed upholstery and the cushion that always slipped. My calves hit the edge, and I sank down, tugging him with me. His hands found the hem of my shirt, pushing it up, and I raised my arms, letting it slide off and fall to the floor in a soft heap. The air hit my skin, cool against the flush still lingering from last night, and I settled into his lap, straddling him with a slow, deliberate ease. His breath caught, a sharp hitch as I rolled my hips once, testing the waters. His hands gripped my sides, steadying me, and I moved again, slower this time, more intentional, feeling the tension coil tight beneath me. "Still think this is wrong?" I whispered, my lips brushing his ear, my voice low and teasing. He didn't answer, just matched my rhythm, his hands firm against my skin, guiding me as we found a sink. The armchair creaked under us, a quiet groan that blended with the hum of the morning outside. I could feel him holding back, keeping control, but every shift of my hips pulled him closer to letting go. His fingers tightened, sliding up my back, tracing the curve of my spine, and I arched into it, letting the heat build. My breath came faster, brushing his neck, and he exhaled hard, his head tipping back just a fraction. I leaned in closer, my chest pressing against his, the rough weave of his shirt scraping my skin. His hands moved again, one settling low on my hip, the other resting at the base of my neck, holding me steady as we moved together. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in with every creak of the chair, every shift of our bodies. I rocked harder, just once, and he tensed beneath me, a low sound rumbling in his throat. Then I stopped, easing back, my hands braced on his shoulders as I caught my breath. His eyes met mine, dark and searching, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run a mile. I climbed off him slowly, reaching for my shirt on the floor. I slipped it back on, the fabric settling over me like nothing had happened, though the air still buzzed with what we'd done. He sat there, hands resting on his thighs, watching me with that steady gaze of his, like he was trying to figure out what came next. I smoothed my hair back, tucking a strand behind my ear, and turned toward the kitchen. "Come for dinner tonight," I said, my voice casual, light, like I was asking him to pass the salt. He blinked, caught off guard. "Dinner?" I glanced back over my shoulder, a small smile tugging at my lips. "You, Lucas, and Mason." His expression shifted, surprise, then something else, something heavier. I stepped to the counter, picking up my coffee again, the mug warm against my palms. "Bring an appetite," I said, taking a sip, letting the words hang there. He didn't move for a beat, just sat there, lips parted, his hands flexing once against his jeans. Then he stood, slow and deliberate, his boots scuffing the floor as he crossed the room. He stopped near the door, turning to look at me one last time. "You're something else, Grace," he said, his voice rough but steady, like he'd just decided something for himself. I tilted my head, meeting his eyes, and shrugged lightly. "Guess you'll find out." He didn't say anything else, just nodded once, sharp and final, then stepped outside, the screen door creaking shut behind him. I leaned against the counter, the coffee bitter on my tongue, and listened to the sound of his truck rumbling to life down the street. The day stretched out ahead, but my mind was already on tonight. They'd come, all three of them. I'd make sure of it. The knock came just after 6, a single sharp rap followed by 2 slower ones, like they couldn't decide who'd lead the charge. I'd been expecting it, counting on it. The table was set, candles flickering low, casting soft shadows across the plates. A pot of stew simmered on the stove, filling the house with the rich scent of thyme and beef, and a bottle of red wine sat open, breathing on the counter. I smoothed the front of my dress, a light, flowing thing with no straps, the hem brushing just above my knees, and opened the door. Henry stood in front, his broad frame filling the space, calm as ever. Lucas hovered behind him, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes flicking anywhere but mine. Mason lingered a step back, shifting his weight, his quiet unease almost palpable. "Right on time," I said, stepping aside with a smile. They filed in, the air shifting with their presence, Henry's steady stride, Lucas's restless energy, Mason's careful steps. I'd kept the lights low, the music soft, a slow jazz tune humming from the old radio in the corner. The dress caught the candlelight as I moved, smooth and deliberate, no apologies underneath, just skin and confidence. I played the host, pouring wine into their glasses, brushing Lucas's arm as I handed him his, letting my fingers graze Henry's knuckles when he took his. Mason muttered a quick, "Thanks," his voice barely breaking the surface, and I hugged them one by one, light, familiar, like this was just another night. But the tension coiled tighter with every touch, every glance. We sat, me between Henry and Lucas, Mason across the table, his shoulders stiff, eyes darting like he was trying not to stare. I let my leg press against Henry's under the table, slow and subtle, and when he didn't pull away, I pressed harder, feeling the muscle in his thigh tense. "How's your week been, Lucas?" I asked, my hand brushing his arm as he shrugged, his voice catching mid-answer. I turned to Mason, leaning forward just enough. "Still working that old truck of yours?" He blinked, stammered a, "Yeah," and I nodded, smiling, my fingers drifting along Henry's leg now, tracing the seam of his jeans. The conversation stumbled, their words clipped, their glasses emptying faster than I'd expected. Dinner wound down, the plates nearly cleared, and I stood, stacking them with a soft, "Don't move, I'll be right back." I carried them to the kitchen, leaving them by the sink, and returned slower, letting my steps echo in the quiet. They were still seated, alert, watching me like they weren't sure what this was anymore. I stopped beside the table, meeting Henry's gaze, then Lucas's, then Mason's. My hands found the hem of my dress, and I pulled it up and over my head in one fluid motion, letting it fall to the floor. The silence hit hard. No words, just breath, their eyes locked on me. Lucas's widened, hungry. Henry's jaw clenched, fists curling on his thighs. Mason froze, like he'd forgotten how to move. I stepped toward Lucas, slow and steady, and settled into his lap, his hands finding my hips as I eased down. My breath warmed his neck as I moved against him, steady and focused, the quiet rustle of his shirt filling the space. His grip tightened, fingers pressing into my waist, and he met every shift, his lips brushing my shoulder, chest rising fast. "Don't hold back," I whispered, and he didn't. His hands sliding along my sides, pulling me closer with every roll of my hips. The couch creaked beneath us, tension building, his breath quickening. Then I turned my head. "Henry," I said, low and clear. He'd been watching, still dressed, gaze steady. I beckoned him closer, unfastening his belt with slow care, sliding it free as he stepped forward. I teased him gently, my lips brushing soft against him, one hand braced on Lucas's chest, the other on Henry's hip. The air thickened, breath and movement weaving together. I pulled back, glancing at Mason, still seated, still clothed, eyes wide. I slid off Lucas, crossing to him, and kissed him, gentle and coaxing. His shirt came off, his chest heaving unevenly, and I knelt, unfastening his pants, guiding him to join us. We shifted, Lucas beneath me on the floor, Henry pressing close behind, Mason trembling in my hands. I found a rhythm, rocking between them, heat spiraling higher. Mason shuddered first, his breath ragged, then Lucas tensed, gripping me tight. Henry followed, his arms wrapping around me, and I arched, the wave crashing through me, scattering my breath. We collapsed, tangled and breathless, their warmth surrounding me, and I knew this was only the beginning of what I'd set in motion.